Alright, y'all. It is time for a Many Friends sketchbook session. We're drawing with a Bic ballpoint pen, one of my favorites. And here we go. So we're starting out just sketching out the character that we're going to draw. Trying to figure out how this character is going to be situated on the page, what they're going to be doing, and how we're going to make it all make sense. So I'm just starting to map out the shape of the character, relying on some, common shapes and common marks that I have stored up in my brain just from drawing these characters all the time. And here, once I drew the leg, I was able to figure out where we're going. I knew I could keep the character in the page, and now it's a matter of figuring out what will this character be doing. Drew in some armpit hair there. Always got the smiley face. Going over some lines. Now it's time to start adding some shading. What I'm looking for when I'm shading is imperfections in the line work, to use that as a way to kind of give the character like some sense of realness, reality. In my head, these characters are soft and they're not perfect at all. And so when there's weird lines that don't meet well, or there's points of the line that meet up and overlap, we can use shading and maybe a thicker line to kind of cover up those mistakes. Going all over the character, adding outline, adding shading where we think it's needed. And soon we'll start adding in elements of the background and of the foreground to give the character some context. And here we're going in, we're adding shapes, trying to figure out how to make them look like a scene. And so I know I wanted some stars because I like kind of the idea of space. So we just drew a couple stars. Now we're adding some shading to start to bring the forms that the character's standing on into the actual composition, into the setting. And to kind of push the space idea, this sort of floating about, I added these blobs around the forms. And it also was an opportunity for me to add in some pattern, some visual interest, something a little different. And I love stripes. And I also love filming them in time-lapse while I color them in. I love to watch that. So here you go. Do our best to keep our lines crispy. We love a crispy line. Here we go. We added some ones in the corners to add to the composition and to fill out the page. I think that's really important, is to fill the page to the point where it feels cohesive. And that was my goal this time, was to fill the page. adding these shapes really helped establish the foreground of the drawing and helped bring it all kind of into one piece. Now we're adding some color for the background. I think we're starting with a burnt ochre Prismacolor marker. And we're going to be using Prismacolor for the entirety of the background. And now as I'm doing these drawings, I don't really have an idea in mind. I'm just kind of improvising. And so leaving these edges unfinished at first is how I kind of give myself some grace and let myself figure out what to do. And so here's what we're going to go for, is this kind of groovy, wavy background with a bunch of different colors. These markers are pretty old, so some of them don't work as well. That's the same marker, just the narrow end and the broad end. I guess they have two different ink reserves in there. This broad end has a lot of life, but the narrow does not. I've had these markers probably for years. It would be crazy cool one day to get a whole set, but you know, we don't all have the money for that. Could spend that couple $100 on groceries. That'd be sick. Or a hamburger, or 200 hamburgers. Here we're going in with an orange. This might have been Carmine Red. Can't really remember at this point, but there we go again, flipping the marker around. And the cool thing about the broad end of Prismacolor markers is it's actually kind of like 3 different size markers on one end, depending on how you hold it. And if you pay good attention, you can use the broad end for a lot of different applications. You can really play with the size, with the amount of pressure you put on it, and how you hold it at the what angle you hold it at in relation to the paper or the surface you're drawing on. And I think you'll see that here. Yeah. So we're gonna finish up the line with the narrow end of the broad side of the Prismacolor marker, and then fill it in with the actual broad tip. Coming back in with the first color, burnt ochre. I really love the way this looks. I love this color, especially next to an orange or a yellow. And these all kind of are in a similar family of color, so it's nice to see them with each other. We're just going to fill the rest of this background in, following the same pattern. Make it look real groovy. When background's done, it's time to hit it with a bold outline, just a Sharpie marker. And this just reminds us that the focus of the drawing is the character and the setting we've put the character in. It further establishes the foreground from the background in a very graphic way. I really love the way it looks. It really pops. It works really well with the ballpoint pen fill-in that we did with all these shapes and the shading. Just really adds an element of pop here. So pretty stoked.